Hello, everybody. Here we are at another episode of Linh Talks Tech with Linh Nguyen, the CEO and co-founder of IT-Conductor, and I'm your co-host, Fernando Labastida. Lynn, we were talking off camera earlier, and I wanted to bring this up because it's a really interesting topic. And it's about the MSP brain drain and the danger it poses to the three-legged stool of people, the platform and process, and the MSP brain drain, and kind of like how you're seeing this play out and how you're addressing this and what can people do? What are MSPs doing to ameliorate this situation?
Okay, well, thank you for joining us again. I'm going to revisit this topic in a different fashion because recently it's not the first time I talk about, people, process, and platform, because that's really important concept to make sure you understand in anything. And it's not just IT. It's a really important combination. As we know, it's always, there's people involved, there's processes, best practices and procedures. And then there's a platform, which is the tooling or solution that can glue it together, right? And help people be more efficient. Well, in a three-legged stool analogy, if one of the legs are like not so happy or healthy, you have an instability situation. With what I say, what recently happened that I've noticed in the last, say, 2-3 years, primarily, it's always happened. People always move around and all that stuff. But since we've been preaching a lot about knowledge management and skilling and keeping people incentivized, learning, people on LinkedIn loves to get like certifications and posting, I just recently got this certification and that these badges are good, right? Because it says I'm a continuous learner, and it happens with things like cloud transformation. You got guys going, I'm a cloud admin or architect or security admin. Recently, you start seeing like AI, I'm AI this and LLM model that, right? So it's a continuous process. It's nothing new. However, if you imagine that something like this, you've been training your team, you've got top level talent, and doesn't have to be MSP, although they have the most number of people. If you think about the service industry for IT, right? You got the large system integrators and managed service provider who employs above 10,000 employees globally. It's a significant amount of time they invest in training those people to keep them from going to the next competitor who may offer a little bit better compensation or maybe better knowledge so they can gain skills. Very typical, you would see these folks having resumes that say, I work for XYZ, and they all top tier, top 6, top 5 consulting firms for like a year or two. And then they move to the very similar combination, maybe in different orders. All of these folks, I see talent, especially in SAP, a very common, somebody out of college gets a job and works 3 or 4 different companies like this and move on to collect. Why? Because they're collecting name brands that they work for and showing that they grow in experience, right? So what happens with the whole SAP RISE or Cloud ERP Private Edition? We know we talked about this topic, what RISE is doing for the SAP community. Good or bad, I'm not here to say, you go to RISE, don't go to RISE, whatever. But be aware that there is severe brain drain in the talent, because these people who are top talent, they may have worked with SAP for 20 years, 15 years, whatever. They've had skills that are very valuable to the customer. Either they work for the customer, they work for the service provider. These guys are top talent. They demand high pay, and they have positions that are of influence. They architect things. They see things end to end. They take accountability. Companies depend on these folks to basically run their IT operations at an optimal level, right? So what happened is, we know there's shortage of these kind of skilled resources, especially ones are well-rounded in not only the tech skills, but also people skills and, emotional intelligence and all of that stuff. Well, what I see recently, and this is my experience personally, right? I have customers and I advise companies, and we work with lots of different types of people, both at customer and also at the service providers or system integrators. I see a lot of these guys join the dark side. What I mean by that is they seeing their companies outsourcing to SAP RISE. And you know what? They said, look, I joined because I wanted to grow these skills, whatever skills they wanted to gain. And part of that journey, and then they start seeing that a company has decided, a management has decided now to go to SAP RISE, where a lot of these things that they have skills for, have been building, training on, are no longer going to be used in that capacity. It's nice they have that knowledge, right? Now SAP is going to take over this and this and this and this, and then they'll reduce to doing somewhat different role or less, or become, kind of a liaison to deal with tickets. So they don't see the usefulness, and maybe that also will reflect on, maybe their pay grades, because they can't show every day what they're doing. Oh, I innovated this tool set, or I created this process. So they're leaving. And guess what? Are they leaving for another managed service provider, like I mentioned before, with like 3 or 4 on their resumes to show their experience? All these guys have the same problem now. So what are you going to do? They've joined the dark side. They went and joined SAP. So a lot of this, I've seen top people. I'm talking about like tech leads, even the SAP basis manager, who are typically the technical basis, the manager of the technical skill level for doing daily operation. These guys start showing up on LinkedIn and showing, I've joined SAP as ECS, Enterprise Cloud Services Delivery Manager. And it's happened at least 3 or 4 times in the last year or two, which kind of gives me this kind of a sense that these people, either they don't have a choice and they're going out to look. They won't go out to look, well, who the other people are going to hire that going to use that skill is the people who are going to work for SAP. So we're seeing the movement from customer managed service providers taking these skills, and then incorporating them into their RISE delivery model. And the customer's losing this resource, or the partner's losing this resource. And now you've got this people gap in that brain drain, right? So now you're saying, you know what? I don't have these people that, let's say, for example, this guy was great at doing upgrades. This guy was great at doing, automating my daily operations. He was great at troubleshooting performance problem. Or this guy was great at doing, clustering for high availability, so I can have higher level of service level objectives, right? 99.9. Now I don't have those guys. What happens? Well, one of your 3 legs is now shorter, right? So if you happen to be an organization that have fairly good processes, like best practices, well-documented knowledge base and run books, and then you have a fairly good set of tools or things that help you incorporate that into daily process operations and best practice, well, you can somewhat compensate for that loss of skill. But if you weren't so great in that, now you're going to have to ramp up and compensate. And what I mean by compensate is like, if you don't have good processes, it's time to adopt those, right? Get in best practices, get advisors to tell you where your strengths and weaknesses are. Start doing more of the platform. If I don't have people, I don't have as many people who are skilled in that. I should then get maybe an expert to automate that, right? And come up with a process that is fairly good, works in most of the time, automate that so that less people have to be that skill level to do the same operations to maintain your stability of the 3-legged stool, right? Even if the leg is short on this side, you can compensate on the other side stronger, right? But if you just leave and say, ignore that, what happened eventually, you only have 2 legs. Your stool is going to fall over, right?
Yeah.
So I see this as a problem, and maybe some people who are observant about this, especially, like I say, on LinkedIn, is very obvious. People just show up, hey, I'm now the SAP this, SAP that, right? And these are not junior people. They've been around, like I say, over 10, 15 years. And I see this transition, and maybe this is unique to this case where the software vendor is also like doing the managed services, and they're trying to become a cloud service company, and therefore, they're attracting the talent because they say, hey, we're growing, look, we're hiring. So people naturally elevate to that. But what does that do to the rest of the user base community in the managed services, which is a large part? Remember, most of the Western world, at least the US, Americas, the Europeans, etc., Asia Pacific, a lot of these, we're growing IT as a service industry, right? We're
Right.
not making widgets or you're screwing on little bolts on iPhone. The service industry grow by people accumulating knowledge, translating that knowledge to some service, capturing that in some level of best practices and solutions, and deliver as a platform. But if you start seeing the drain, I don't know what's going to happen. But that trend eventually will become somewhat of a critical threshold. They will fail to attract people because I'm like, why are these people leaving? Like, why should I join you? Or set of things that I could do is now limiting my ability to move either laterally or vertically or, just less attractive, right? So if I join a firm and they say, hey, you could do this, or you can just join firms that you just do this or this. Somebody who is more looking for growth, they want something that has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And so I think at the end of the day, we have to look at this as, yes, I'm observing maybe folks who listen to this maybe can echo what their experiences is, but I definitely see a lot of this happening through my own network. Personally, people that work for, my customers or firms that I advise for. And then I also see my connections on LinkedIn doing the same thing, right? Lots of them going like this and that. And again, I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm observing this and I see a trend. And to me, from my experience, it's disturbing. And that the only way I see really to fix this, because you can't really change what companies do. You can change what people do. And if people start adopting knowledge as a digital format where, we can capture that and make it into a way that I can automate this, I can automate that, I can put solution in this way, that way. You somewhat has mitigated the risk. If you mitigate this risk, you have to start now before all your knowledge leaves the door.
Right.
And that means for customers, start taking control of what things or tools you can put in to help you manage this process. It could be workload orchestration tools. It could be process orchestration tool. It could be observability tool to help you see more, do more with less, right? And faster, right? So that's one thing. I give you an example, like, if you're doing an upgrade and, you used to rely on this one guy that's left, right? He's really good. He's like on the ball and I don't know, maybe he doesn't sleep at all. You always have that kind of star in an organization where they just seem like
kind of a unicorn. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have the talent and they have the, kind of motivation to do it. He leaves. Everybody's expendable, meaning that, they can be replaced, but how much time? Can you wait 2 years, 3 years, whatever? Be lucky, hire the right talent, compensate. You shouldn't count on luck. Business don't run on luck. You have to have a plan. You have to do something that you have control over. And that's a lot of the time, unfortunately, means you have to pick up on those other things, the process in the platform. And then you can somewhat manage and mitigate the risk of the people leaving because of some external factor. So that's my kind of one observation I see recently is that's not recently. I mean, last probably 2 years now. The first one I saw with join SAP RISE as an interim reliever. This guy has 20 years. He's worked on all kinds of SAP projects. He's done work for the large system integrator. He's been a managed service provider. He's been in a migration. And then suddenly, bam, he joins SAP. And then we had an interesting conversation. I said, what do you do now? I'm like, well, I'm like a technical account manager. I manage like 6 SAP customer accounts. What do you do? Oh, I escalate tickets because he had the background, but he's not really using that technical skills anymore.
Yeah.
He just went where, my job's getting eliminated. My customer, I'm taking this opportunity for whatever personal reason. But the kind of work they do now is definitely not what I'd say, their background is in. So it's not only that the customer and the partner lose the skill resource, but that skill resource now goes to somewhere else and not really using his, I'd say 80% of his background. He's using maybe more people skill, more project management skill, and not really the technical skill that he has the experience doing. I myself am lucky. I can do whatever I like. Being around for 30 years doing a lot of SAP work, I can cherry pick because, I'm passionate about, automation. I once spent time automating things. So I do that. But I'm so very customer focused. So I like to work with customers and understand their problem. And to do that, you have to get into the trenches. So I'm pretty still active in the trenches doing things, hey, I'll jump on and help a customer with a migration if I have to, if I jump on if there's a performance issue. And so all of our customers are like that. We get on IT-Conductor. The difference where we are compared to tool seller platform of some sort is that we are platform as service, and we take pride in engaging with every customer. We say, hey, how's the platform working? What can we do better? What things should we automate for you? Because I'm looking to engage with the pain points where it exists. And that doesn't exist in some isolated office where I just sit and say, hey, you guys go do this, do this. So my team know I am engaged with customers all the time, 24/7. Sometimes I'm on escalated calls with CIOs. We already talked about this one topic where, I'll get an outreach from a managed service provider and say, hey, we're in this kind of critical situation. Could you hop on, where the CIO, you have, you can help calm them down. So I like my role, but not everybody has this flexibility. And so I worry for what's happening in that. And I've seen it. I've seen it in Europe. I've seen it in Asia. I've seen it in North America. So it's not isolated. It doesn't happen just because of one region. Sometimes you can associate it to a behavioral thing with culture or just, the background. The way I've seen it, I think it is worldwide phenomenon. And I hope others can share their experience as well to see either side. Even if you went to join the dark side,
Yeah.
I will still talk to you. We talk about the empire being SAP and then the rebels are being the customers and the SIs and MSPs and
the Jedi. Yeah.
We need a balance, right? The force needs to be balanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really enjoy having this outside view, and I think that to compensate for this, of course, I have to also pitch why I'm passionate about doing the automation, right?
Yeah.
Because it is one of that critical leg in the stool.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, there's no point me to showing up work. I could go consulting. I make pretty good money doing projects, but I want to solve the problem for many. And to do that at volume, at scale, you have to do it at platform level. You have to address the mass in terms of the service providers who can use your technology to service many customers. You have to do it for customers and then the partners. They're not just like one customer. In a consulting gig, I would be happy just like go to one customer, stay there forever. I do have example of that I'll cover in future episodes where I spent years at a customer trying to help them with a large project and what I learned from that and all that sort of stuff. And I'll share that in a different episode. There's lots of nuggets where, some of IT-Conductor's things came out of those engagements. So I don't regret that, but I have learned experience where I don't want to spend all my time at one customer, regardless how lovely they are, because why? There's a brain drain on me, right?
Right.
Customers appreciate my vast experience, and the collection of that experience transfer into a product or platform will help a lot more users and cases than just doing the problem for one customer. And that's why I think the difference from a founder's mentality is that I realize that what we can do now may be just a first use case, but its full use will impact a lot more users on both ends. Yeah. And that to me is the empowerment for me to take what I can and endure the early type of work effort, because it takes a lot to build a platform. If anybody's been in this role, it's not like I have an idea and suddenly it becomes a product and I'm selling millions of it, right? There's a severe investment. If you take it up, you have to go full distance. You can't go half-hearted, right? Yeah. A lot of success you see in the market about products and platform, it didn't happen overnight. People pour a lot of effort into it, a lot of money, and a lot of customers input as well. So that's why I take up this role to make sure that my ideas don't go to waste. And also it's not only my idea, like customers bring scenarios to us and say, hey, could you automate this for us? And say, hey, why not? We have the framework, let's do it. And does it work for you? And is it universally transferable and be used by somebody else with like minimum changes? And if that's the case, then it becomes a solution for us. And we've done this for things like change management. We've done it for migration systems, performance management, all of these areas that we see. They actually come from customers and partners. And that's what I really appreciate, is solving these problems on an ongoing basis.
So that's really interesting about how you, so you've developed your platform by getting suggestions from clients, helping to solve problems, patterns that you've seen. Like, for example, this pattern that you just discussed about these resources going to the dark side, after 20 years at a systems integrator or an MSP, right? Being able to solve these problems and you putting in the work, the investment of time and money into the platform. But I wanted to further press you on what do you see as sort of like the solution for this brain drain? Is the stool going to become now more emphasized on the platform, on the automation to compensate for the dwindling talent supply? Or is it going to be a different kind of talent that we're going to be like, how is that being, how do you see that being solved? What's your solution
Yeah.
for that?
So in the age now, we can't talk something without talking about AI, right? So people, the last one you think of AI, your experience with it, the general consensus is that it will replace some lower level tasks, things that menial things. Let's say, for instance, if I ask you, how is the system performing today? And then your staff goes on and logs onto the systems and checks a bunch of dashboards and KPIs and reports back. It's like this, blah, 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 right? Those basic things are what we already have done with our technology. So like automatically report this, send it out, email it out on a regular basis, or, throw it up. Or don't tell me at all unless it's abnormal, right? We are flooded with information. So our idea is that one of our slogan is like minimize the noise and maximize performance. We get way too much noise. You can just compare an email or something like that. So nobody wants more alerts. They want intelligent stuff. So what I see going towards has always been using machine learning and some level of correlation, some level of intelligence. I'm not going to say artificial intelligence at this point because it's domain specific, right? If you're talking about a particular system, what kind of noise it is, it needs learning. It's very domain specific. But in general, the brain drain will say reduce people with skills to analyze things. You have to compensate for systems that will automatically do the analysis of root cause or pinpoint close to the fact that, hey, if I'm going to jump out parachute from 30,000 feet and I will land in that little, like oval shaped thing in the middle of a playground. First, I don't really care the first 20,000 feet. I'm kind of like, I'm having fun, right? But at some point, I need to kind of guide and pinpoint and have visions and guide towards that. So I have to have control systems, right? So what we talk about sometimes is that you can have some general stuff being done. Something gets very specific where you need to land that thing. You need guidance system, you need intelligence, you need automation, right? So sometimes we can drive 100 mile, 200 miles across the country. Where we get into trouble is when we get into the city. And then we're like, man, I'm not used to this traffic. And, and then you get into accidents. So what I'm saying is that to reduce this, we compensate. So for instance, you have the full self-driving type of technologies pushed right now. Is because it knows every road very well. It's traveled over and it recorded it. It knows exactly. So us humans, in order to compensate for that, what we do, we need systems. We need guidance, right? You can't have like 3 guys looking at the screen to diagnose a problem. You can have one guy. Now, so the other 2 left for the dark side. But the one guy needs a system that focuses. Instead of looking at all the noise in like 10 different areas and printing up all these charts to try and look, like you're an X-ray technician, you look in all these charts and, well, the system should guide you to very near that 10,000 feet and say, hey, here, you need to zoom in here because this is where you need to land, right? And so in general terms is that the systems will help you be more precise without having all the resource and knowledge to do all the analytics for you, right? And that may be machine learning, that may be AI, it may be assisted, whatever combination. I love hybrid, right? Nothing black and white.
Yeah.
One way too much, overcompensating. Hybrid, somewhere in the middle is where we need to live in order to be satisfying both the people, the process, and the platform. If you lose one, yes, you need to compensate for it. And to compensate for it, you got to step up intelligent systems. And that intelligent system, I'm saying generically, it could be anything. It could help you in like the observability. So I'm looking at the human senses, like you've got eyes and ears and touch and smell and all that.
Yeah.
Well, you need to improve all those senses in order for you to be more focused on the problem, right? And maybe I'm very good at smelling, but I need help with eyes.
Right.
It's unusual to have somebody with all the senses that are so acute, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by you need tools and solutions to help you with all the senses that you don't have. So it's okay not to have all those senses, but you will adapt the systems to help you compensate for those senses that you don't have that acute sensitivity for.
Yeah, I really like that analogy of the senses because you're right. I mean, not everybody can have as acutely tuned all of their senses, just like in the work world, of IT management, nobody can have those exact skills all packaged into one. But yeah, great. And I was just wondering if maybe you could provide a few specific examples to kind of illustrate your points, without naming names or anything.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so just as recent as probably a month ago, we had it's our customer. They've been on premise. We helped them from beginning of SAP. They had already a managed service provider in place. They changed in the middle because the service provider also start acquiring other service providers. And, I've talked about this in the past too, where you have the bigger one consuming the little guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the customer was starting to lose the brain drain, and they start feeling that they need to go to RISE because they don't have enough to handle their complex operations. And so they decided to go to RISE, right? SAP RISE, and they actually did migrate. But now they're realizing one of their key person left the team and joined the dark side, right? Because he didn't say that when he left. He said, "I'm leaving." Okay, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Okay. So then they left. And once the guy left, the customer just realized that, hey, you know what? We already now on RISE. SAP is doing this part, but look at all these things I'm still responsible for. And then they realize, hey, I need help because I have an upcoming, in this case, a system refresh. Where you cloning a system from production to put into QA for testing, for quality assurance purposes. And so while they don't have the resource they used to have that does this, and it's very time consuming. So these customers know that we automate this already. They just said, hey, could you guys help us with this? And said, sure, we already had automation. We have this pain point. It's always one of those things where there's 100 things to do and you need that skill resource or you need a very well documented procedure. We automate 80 and 90% of it, right? And so we say, hey, on RISE, SAP is not going to help you with that. They may help you with the database copy and things, but there's 1,000 things, 100 things, whatever to do afterwards to make sure the system now is ready for your QA processes. So they actually are very happy to engage us continuously. We've never dropped service. We've actually maintained service for them when they're on-prem. And while
That's
they're
excellent.
transitioning to RISE, and now they're on RISE, and they even need us more now because they don't see inside. They don't have the tool they used to have on-prem, right? So you're not only saying I need tool, but saying that those solutions that you provide must coexist in relationship to this hybrid scenario I'm talking about, right? Customers still have the system on-prem. Now the customer has some systems in the cloud with SAP RISE. They need to coexist. How do you have a solution that will manage and see end-to-end for everything? Because customers, remember, they don't put everything in one basket. SAP is not going to run all the systems for them. There's still going to be some systems that are not in scope to be on RISE. It's whatever. So customers still maintain this. SAP has this. How do you have oversight? We call it manager of manager. You might have a manager here. You might have a manager here. Who's going to be the manager of manager that can oversee all of them? And that's where we kind of come in and still relevant, regardless of where they go. If they chose RISE or no RISE, we're still relevant and we're playing this role where now they're on there and they need even more help because they have less staff and they need processes that have changed and they're adopting some new processes, and technology who automate has to be adaptive.
Right.
So we have the adaptive solution. Hey, now you're on here and you're on here. So we just adapt and we can connect to both of them and we'll work in hybrid mode. That's fine. So we're not rigid in that sense. So it's very important to realize that if you buy software that's rigid or tools that are rigid, you're going to basically throw it out and waste all that money. That's another example I will bring up next time as well. I've known companies who've blown away millions of dollars on tools and platforms, even though I say, don't do it. And you know what? Some of those customers a year or so later did it. And now they just realize those tools are not going to work for them in the new environment, AKA RISE. So what's going to happen? They didn't go with a, let's say a month-to-month subscription or year-to-year subscription. They went enterprise. Right? And now they're like, I can't use this.
Yeah.
We've had this actually example, that same example was one of our customer who I won't name, but the old SAP CEO was on their board. So it made them go to, certain thing. And then they migrate later on and they couldn't use the tool anymore. It's just, there's a lot of this kind of waste, right? So it pains me to see, okay, if you, it's fine if you like some tool, but you need to be able to be nimble and you need to be able to agile to adapt and to change, because in IT, I can guarantee you there's change, right?
Yeah.
Nobody runs a laptop for 10 years. Right?
No. And maybe even 3 years.
Yeah. So it just gets faster and faster.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think we have a lot of things to follow up with in the next interview, the next episode. So we're talking about a lot of things related to the brain drain and tool proliferation and all that. So, Lin, this has been a really fun episode, and I think we're covering some really interesting topics for the whole SAP ecosystem and automation.
Thank you.
So we'll see each other next time in the next episode, Lin.
All right. Peace.